to skip my PowerPoint. Now, where do we go from here? I thought this was a relevant question because I know that there are many of us who are asking this question. What are we going to do in the summer? What are we going to do in the fall? And what are we going to do beyond that? So I thought that that would be an appropriate topic and title for my conversation here with you in the next, let's say, 20 or so minutes, 20, 25 minutes. I'm going to leave a little time at the end for questions as well, if you've got any. If you don't know where you are going, any road will get you there. It's a very famous quote from Lewis Carroll. And what this means is that if you don't have a plan, then where you're going to go, it doesn't really matter where you're going. So what I want to emphasize here is that the road is not 100% clear for us. However, we are planning and we are thinking about what the near future and the midterm future are looking like, and we're trying to do some planning. So we are trying to identify the road that we want to take. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes are three different topics. First of all, I want to extend thanks to a number of people. I've also got an anecdote related to my professional development project, and I'll share that with you. And then finally, I'll get into the meat of this presentation, which is where do we go from here. But let me start with my thanks. I want to give thanks to the TDU and the TDU trainers. They've done a wonderful job this year, given all the ups and downs that we've had. They took on this task of ensuring that everybody in the School of Foreign Languages would partake in a professional development project. And as far as I understand, everybody did to some degree, and I'm very happy about that. I give them a lot of credit for making this happen and for encouraging and motivating everybody in the School of Foreign Languages to bring us to this point where we are, starting from last week and into today and tomorrow. I also want to thank Asin for all of the work that she's done with the TLC and all of the support she's giving us right here and now throughout these 2 days, last week, and of course through all the training that the TLC has done since the middle of March when we started down this new road for us. I also want to thank Darvish. Darvish has done a lot of really good work for us. He designed these two posters for us, which he's doing pro bono, meaning that we're not giving him any compensation other than giving him a good pat on the back. And one other design component that I'm really thankful to Darvish for are badges that we're going to be handing out to the workshop presenters. So if you're presenting at the workshop, you're going to get the 3-star badge. And if you can turn your presentation somehow into a publication, then we would be really excited to be giving you a crown badge as well. Details on that will be coming, but again, thanks Darvish for all of the work that you've done here with the graphics and helping us move the badging forward. My next thing is my anecdote, okay? I started off the year working with my personal trainer, Anita. God bless her. She has not had an easy year with me, partly because I struggled to get my head around an idea. I wanted to do the flipped classroom idea, and I made it about halfway. I actually created some videos, but by the time I got my video up and running, whether it was because of editing or the shooting schedule, the moment had passed in my class. And so from that point on, it moved into the online mode, and therefore I was not as successful as I would have liked to have been. But I'm greatly appreciative of Anita for all of her encouragement, for all of her guidance and patience and perseverance. But Anita, perhaps next year, maybe the metaphor that we should be using is something more like this than the Sisyphus image. But one other thing I want to share with you is this other image has no relevance to this to my anecdote, but nonetheless, I think it's a nice image. So I wanted to share that with you. Okay. Anyway, where do we go from here? All right, let's get into the meat of this conversation now. We're in a new reality, as you all are fully aware. It's an exciting new reality. I'm excited about it. Not the social distancing part, but there's a lot of potential here, and that's what I'm hoping to focus on and discuss in this talk here. So the new reality is social distancing. And that's what we really have to, that's what's really driving the type of planning that we're doing. It's a major part of what is driving what we're doing here. So that means smaller class sizes, and it means less face time. So the other part of this new reality is how we're going to be delivering because of the social distancing. In the summer, most likely it's going to be fully online. We've already discussed this. I haven't heard anything to the contrary, so I'm leaving a slight crack in the door. That's why I'm putting it at 95%, but I'm fairly confident that we are going to be doing fully online in the summertime. At least that's what the conversations are. But you're probably more interested in the fall because everybody will be teaching in the fall. So the probability of fully face-to-face, I'm putting that at 1%. I don't want to put 0. You never know. IUE has never failed to surprise us, so you never know what might be happening by the fall. But chances are it's not going to be fully online. I think everybody has learned that fully online is not as effective as they want it to be, and therefore hybrid is probably the way that we're going to go into the future. And I want to make a comment about this hybrid, actually. And hybrid, it could be hybrid, it could be blended. You know, the term we're also using is flipped. I'm just going to use hybrid right now as a kind of a generic term. I'm not going to go into the specific definitions of what these three different forms are. But the point I want to make is that although we are kind of being pushed in this direction because of the pandemic, I don't think that we will back off of it once we're on the other side of the pandemic, if we're on the other side of a pandemic. Forget about health issues aside, I think that this offers a lot of potential. It's a lot of exciting potential for us, a lot that we can do with this format. And so I think we are going to be using hybrid in some form or fashion for the foreseeable future. So we've got some things that we've got to wrap our heads around as we move forward, though. And the two that I wanted to talk about right now is that we have to have a different change in perspective. Face-to-face has always been thought of, particularly when it comes to language education, as the only way to go. And we have to shift that perspective to saying, okay, face-to-face is still really important, but it's only part of the equation now. We have other tools at our disposal, and we have other means, and we have to realize that face-to-face is important, but it's not the only way that we are going to be effectively teaching our students, particularly in the language classroom. Likewise, we have to become more agile. We have to become more creative. This is not to say that people are not being agile, people are not being creative, but whether it's driven by the pandemic or whether it's simply driven by ourselves at the program level or the institutional level, we have to learn to be much more flexible. We have to become much more creative in the way that we're delivering our instruction and thinking about it and collaborating and talking about it. We will be working on this, and I'll talk about this at the end of my presentation, but it's really important that we think about changing the way that we're working in terms of planning, in terms of assessing, moving with flexibility and agility and creativity. We also have to change our approach, the way that we're instructing. Obviously, we have a much greater use of technology, and we will probably be, to some degree, backing off that use of technology. Right now, it's 100% technology, particularly as we sit here today. We're all in our own little spaces with our own computers in front of us, or like me, I'm at the office, but nonetheless, there's going to be much more technology used in the classroom. It's not just going to be Panopto and Blackboard as a repository for our materials. And so we have to think about ways that we are going to be using technology, not just in the instructional spectrum, but across time as well. Throughout the week, students are going to be exposed to much more of our education, and that means that they are going to be using much more of their technology. We're also going to have to focus more on the students becoming autonomous and better at reflecting on their learning. We need to ensure that the students become the learners and active learners, not passive learners. Right now, many of our students are passive learners. They're not active learners, and we have to shift that. We have to get them to see the reality, and that if they're going to learn the language, they have to take more control of their language learning. They are not just sitting in a classroom listening to us and hoping for the next assessment. Likewise, that includes much more reflection on their parts to determine where they are, where they're going, how they're going to get there. And I think an important point of this, and I'll get to this when I talk about assessment, is to shift that focus from I'm simply trying to pass a class, I'm trying to get enough points, to what am I doing with this language? How am I going to use this language for my academic career, for my professional career, and how am I getting there? So all of these pieces about autonomy, about reflection, are going to take much more emphasis as we move forward. I put a quote up here from Mary Jane from our Curriculum Materials Development Unit. Mary Jane has done some research. She has 2 publications related to using technology, flipped classrooms. And so there are a couple of quotes that I pulled from her papers that I think are quite relevant to what we're looking at right now, what we're talking about right now. Another important change is increased communication, not only amongst ourselves as instructors and as administrators, but also with our students. We have to open the lines of communication because we're going to be seeing our students less, and they're going to be relying much more on us having communication, whether it's through WhatsApp or through Blackboard or Oasis or whatever means that we're using. The communication is going to have to be much higher. My final point there, and I've got this in brackets because this is probably a temporary phenomenon, but nonetheless, it's going to be important for our undergraduate friends in the fall semester at least, and beyond that, probably it will probably trickle on for a couple of years. But because of the limitations in the assessments that we're doing in the prep program this year, primarily we've eliminated speaking from the assessments. So there's a very good chance that students who may not have passed out of the prep program this year are going to pass out of the prep program. What that means is, looking into 101, 102 and beyond, is that the students may not be coming with the same level of skills that we would normally expect. And so we may have to rethink the way that we deliver the curriculum in those classes. And we can talk about that more later. Okay, there's also a change in structure that we're going to be facing. Again, this is related to the social distancing. So in a normal situation, let's say you have a class of 24, it would look like this, but now probably it's going to look more like this. And we are going to have at least 2 groups. We'll break a class into, depending on the physical space that we've got to work with, we might be looking at 2 separate groups coming into our classes. Now, what does this mean for instruction? So I want to emphasize that this is a hypothetical situation. We haven't received the ratios from UIC or the ratios from the rector's office, but this is just one way to think about this. So if you've got a 3-credit class, you might have 1 hour of asynchronous instruction per week, and those your students in your group A and your group B are accessing that at some point during the week. And then in the face-to-face mode, group A would come in, let's say on a Monday, and you'd spend a couple hours with them. And then group B would come in on Wednesday and you'd spend a couple of hours with them. Now, I know that that math doesn't work out perfectly. This is, again, just a hypothetical. Likewise, with the 4-credit class, you might have an hour of asynchronous, and by asynchronous, I'm talking about videos or some other delivery that's recorded and put online for the students to watch at any time. They might have an hour of synchronous, which brings the whole class together for some activities, and then you'll have face-to-face as well. Again, these are hypothetical situations. I'm waiting to hear what the ratios would be, but this is just to give you a sense of how something might look, whether you have a 3-credit or a 4-credit class. Okay, so likewise, what might each of these different components look like? So in an asynchronous class, you may have a video that's discussing the conceptual aspects of what that week's objectives are. You might be describing an assignment, a project. You might even be also launching a project or a problem. You're giving, again, it's a conceptual, it's descriptive. There's no interaction in the asynchronous classroom. In the synchronous classroom, it's taking it to the next level, which is you're more practical. You can be digging into the descriptions. You could be taking from the launch to the actual group work if you've given them pair work or group work to start out on a problem. And then finally, in the face-to-face environment, you're obviously working much more on the practical. You're doing questions and answers, which would be the same as in the synchronous, but face-to-face, maybe it's a little more effective. Maybe it's more of the comfort zone for our students and for the instructors. The one thing that we won't be doing probably in the face-to-face, because we have to remain with social distancing, is the group work and the pair work. So again, it's going to be a little bit awkward as we get used to the face-to-face environment, but that's going to be the reality that we will be facing there. Okay, I have another quote from Mary Jane here from one of her articles regarding flipped classrooms. And this is the idea that we as the institution, we as the program, we as the instructors are going to have to spend much more time focusing on developing learner autonomy. We can't just expect them to jump out of the nest and start flying. We need to provide support to the students, and we can scaffold it over time, but they have to become much more autonomous if we are going to be using a flipped classroom or an asynchronous model in any regard. I mean, anytime we're asking the students to do something that's instructional but not sitting there in our classrooms, we are going to need the students to become much more autonomous and, again, much more reflective about their learning. We're also going to have a change in assessment. There's going to be much more emphasis on the demonstration, whether you call it demonstration or production, whether you call it competency or mastery. Those could be different terms. They could also suggest a more of a linear or a time approach as they work toward mastery or competency. But the whole idea is that it's moving away from possibly the open-ended questions and certainly the multiple choice questions to an actual demonstration of the abilities and the outcomes that are being transmitted in the classes. Think alternative assessments. We'll talk more about alternative assessments over time, but this is what I want you to start thinking about. It's not going to be the same old, which is good, because we'll be shifting the weighting from a massive, heavily weighted final exam to more smaller projects, either individual or group projects over time, which will, again, be demonstrating that the students haven't just memorized bits and pieces, but they can actually utilize the language, which is where we want to go anyway. If this is going to be, if we're going to go back to that notion of the student reflecting on how is this going to help them academically, how is this going to help them professionally. This will also include perhaps more weighting toward AVRIM's OPG, online participation, greater use of discussion boards and wikis, getting the students to be much more interactive when they're not in the classroom. And also, again, as I keep mentioning, collaborative problems and projects. So it's getting students actually emulating what they're going to be facing in their faculties and in the real world anyways. So these are opportunities. I see these all as opportunities to improve the quality of education that we're going to be providing to our students and motivating them. However, let me emphasize that this does not mean a change in learning outcomes. Our learning outcomes are the same. We still want the students to acquire the language and be able to use their language, whether again in their academic programs or in their professional careers. So let's take a look at the near future. We've got finals from the 22nd. I'm talking undergraduate programs, by the way. Finals from the 22nd of June to the 10th of July. Summer school from the 4th of August to the 4th of September. And then the academic year right now is scheduled to start on the 12th of October. So from the 10th of July, I'm looking at post-finals. I'm looking at the 10th of July to the 10th of October, which is a clean 3 months. What we will be doing is planning on how to deliver and what to deliver. We'll be developing our asynchronous and our synchronous materials. And of course, we'll be regenerating. I know this has been an extremely stressful, extremely difficult year for everybody, and we all need some time. So that's going to be one of our three objectives, one of our three primary objectives over the summer. And the planning and the developmental stages obviously will be fleshed out. We'll have much more detail on this over time, but this is just to give you a sense of what we're thinking at this point. So you can see that this road does not have an end to it because I'm not exactly sure where it goes. It's got a curve in it. It's got a few ups and downs in it, but it's also not a bad road. And so I think we've got the beginnings of a plan here. We have a sense of where we're going. We need some clarification, obviously, from UIC. We need some clarification from the rector's office. But I think we've got a good start. And I think this is really an exciting period. I think we've got a lot of potential here. So thanks for coming along with us. And thanks for joining me here in this conversation. I've got a few minutes for questions. I don't want to make Arthur wait too long. So if somebody's got some specific questions about this presentation, fire away. Thank you. Go ahead, Heather. Are the microphones on or what? Let's go. Heather had a hand up, but you're welcome. Thank you. Thank everybody. The microphones are all switched off. Asen, if you're out there, is it possible to turn on some microphones for a minute or two? I have to type it. Go ahead, Heather.
Okay, sorry, it became available. I'm just a little concerned personally about having so many students online. You know, if it's just going to be like an asynchronous thing, you know, for me, for example, for 410, 310, we have, you know, 3 hours, not 4 hours. So If it's just an asynchronous thing where we are, delivering perhaps the lesson online, then that might be one thing. But as you know, when we have more students online, it's really much more demanding on the teacher. So if we're not able to do group work or anything like that in class, then I guess I'm just not really sure what that would look like for a class like mine. And if, assignments and things like that have to be submitted online, that is, for me, I mean, I think for even especially the 101 and 102 teachers, that's a pretty big problem.
I'm not sure what you mean by a lot of students. Can you clarify what you mean by a lot of students?
Sure. So you said that there would be, in the example that you gave, let's say, there would be two different groups sharing an online class, but meeting twice separately. So that's at least 24 students. So even 24 students in an online class is quite a lot if there's going to be assignments that need to be marked online, considering we would be having different sections and things like that. I know that the 102 teachers were really overwhelmed this term, especially the teachers that had extra hours. Like that's a lot. Like it just takes a lot more time to mark and prepare online classes than it does face-to-face classes. So for a class like mine, I don't think if it's just, like 1 hour asynchronous, 2 hours face-to-face, I think that could be okay. But if there are other stipulations like students have to submit their things online, students have to have discussions, that takes a really long time to go through. And so, we'll be sort of quote unquote having, working the same amount of hours, having the same amount of like quote unquote contact hours, but we'll be spending a lot more time doing this stuff. So I'm just concerned about the number of students because I already did a lot of work and I had smaller classes this term. So I can't even imagine having, 24 or more students like some of the 102 teachers did. So that's just a big concern for me.
I understand your concern. I mean, first of all, there's the reality of the class size. I mean, it's going to be difficult. I think if we start splitting classes even in the asynchronous environment, then I mean, splitting them meaning, if you have let's say an hour or two with group A and then an hour or two with group B, and then you get into the face-to-face, you're talking per section, you're looking at maybe 5 hours of instructional time per week per 24 student class, if that makes sense. So again, we're going to have to rethink it. We're going to have to rethink how we are approaching this, how we are, how the assessments are going, how the assessments are designed, how they're going to be collected, etc. So.
Yeah, because like you said, if we do the async, then it could be okay because they just watch it on their own, right? But if they have a synchronous as well, that can get pretty messy if there's that many students. But I was thinking, like, if this is to be the case, then like, is it possible for like full time to be considered 16 hours? You know what I mean? Like have one less section so that those hours can be used to manage the course, do the marking, that type of thing. I just feel like there needs to be some sort of balance in that sense. It just, something that I'm worried about because like that everybody feels like we do a lot already, and this is going to be more, it'll be more demanding on, like the students will have more autonomy, but it will really put a lot more demands and time constraints on teachers as well.
We'll have to discuss that. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I understand your concern, but yeah, we're going to have to.
Yeah, I mean, I know we can't make decisions right now. It's just right. I don't think that I will be the only person that feels this way or has these concerns. So I think just getting it out there so we start brainstorming when the decisions start to be made, type of thing. So
sure.
Thank you.
I know people want to get on to the next session, but if you have any other questions.